Hi everyone, my name's Carly. I'm the Community Activation and Learning Officer for Melton City Council based at the Kurunjang Community Hub. Today I'm going to show you how to make a chicken soup, and I'm using my grandmother's recipe, so it's an Italian style, what they call brothel. So I'm going to show you how to go through that step by step. So we'll start with the ingredients first. So I use a couple of Marylands. Any piece of chicken on the bone will work. You can use a chicken carcass, you can use a couple of drumsticks. Sometimes if I can't get Maryland, I'll just use drumsticks. So I'm going to use 2 of those today. I use a couple of bay leaves, about a teaspoon of whole peppercorns. You can just grind your pepper into it. I use an onion, a couple of cloves of garlic. Now, a couple of cloves of garlic for me is about 4 giant ones. A couple of potatoes, a couple of carrots, and some celery. Now you can fiddle with your amounts of veggies as you see fit and what your preference is. Sometimes I do put a little bit of extra celery in there, but that's all I've got today. And I also put in a piece of parmigiano Reggiano cheese, and I usually use the rind bit, so that will cook down in the soup as the soup cooks down with it. And then I put some fresh cheese on the soup at the end when we serve it. So I'm just gonna chop up all the veggies and show you how I chop them up. I do now chop them up quite small. You can leave them in big chunks though if you like, so it will cook down and form the broth, which is the stock essentially. So I'll cut all those up and then I'll show you how I brown off the meat first with some of the aromatics, and then we'll get started on the actual stock. Okay, so I've just put some olive oil in the soup pot, so I'm just gonna let that warm up. And to that olive oil, I'm gonna add the 2 Marylands. Now, I'm just gonna season those while they're in this container here. It makes life a little bit easier. So I'll just put some salt and pepper onto them, but then I also add some whole peppercorns into the soup, and they just cook down while the soup is cooking. Now you can put your aromatics like the bay leaves and the peppercorns and stuff in a little cloth and cook that in the soup. I just strain everything out later because there's also some parsley that goes into it, and I take all the chicken meat off the bone and then put it back into the broth, so you can take all the big bits out when you do that, and then you don't have to worry about keeping your aromatics separate. So we'll just add the chicken into the oil now and let that cook down a bit, and then we'll add the garlic and the onion to let them cook with the other aromatics like the peppercorns and the bay leaves, and we can start the stock. Okay, we're just going to add the chicken into this heated oil. Now I did crack some pepper onto the top as well, and that's the skin side, so I'll put them skin side down into the pot now. Maybe don't throw the plastic layer in. So just let these go in here and brown off a little bit. While they're in there, cooking that, season the other side. So that's seasoned for when you flip it over. Now at this point I also add the other aromatics. So I add a couple of bay leaves in. You just buy the bay leaves in the spices sections at the supermarket, so with all your other garlic powders, nutmegs, all that kind of stuff. I add a couple of peppercorns, so like not even a teaspoon, there's probably maybe 8 or 9 there. And this is when I would also add the garlic and the onion in as well. Now I've chopped some of the garlic up, as you can see, but I've also left a couple of the garlic cloves crushed up a bit, but still cold. Now you can chop them up completely, you can leave them whole and just crush them a bit, it's entirely up to you.
Okay, so that's all the aromatics. We'll just let them spread off a little bit and flip the chicken over, and then we can add everything else in some water.
Okay, so we're just going to add the water to make the broth now. So as you can hear, that's still cooking away under there. So I will top that up a little bit more. So then what I'll do is I'll just put that, I'll let that come to the boil. So I'll keep that on a medium-high heat until it comes to the boil. Once it comes to the boil, I'll turn it down to medium-low, and then I let it simmer for a couple of hours. Now, some days, if I can really be bothered, I'll put it on in the morning and I actually let it cook through till to the night. And I just keep topping it up with water as it needs it, and you'll just end up with a bit more of an intense chicken soup broth there. But as long as this cooks for probably 2 to 3 hours, you're still going to get a really tasty soup. So what I do is, as it's cooking, I'll let it cook for probably an hour or so, and then I'll come in and season it as I see fit. So it can take a lot of salt depending on what your taste is. So we'll just start now letting it come to the boil, and then we'll bring it down to a low medium and simmer it for about an hour, and we'll come back and season it then. I did forget to mention before, when I filled it up with water, I also do add a really big bunch of parsley. Now you can leave the parsley whole and then you can take that out later. You use the stalks as well. There's a lot of flavor in the parsley stalks, but I actually dice mine up. I love parsley, so I like to have it in my soup when I eat it later, and I'll actually put some fresh parsley in towards the end again as well. So just add your parsley when you top it up with water. Like I said, you can put it in a big chunk and pull it out later, or you can chop it up like I have and have it cook down into the soup. So we'll just give that all a stir through, and we'll let that come to the boil now, and then turn it down for a simmer. Okay, so this has just come up to the boil. Now it did only take probably 5 or 10 minutes, if that, to come up to the boil. So I will turn that down now to a medium-low heat. And that will cook now for, I will leave it, look, it's 3:30 now when I'm filming, so I'll probably leave this cook for at least 3 or 3.5 hours. I will come and check on it probably every half hour or so. And in about an hour, I will come and season it quite heavily with some salt. And I'll also, as it cooks, you'll notice there will be some, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the camera, but it just gets a little bit of scum at the top. So it's little bits of impurities cooking out of the chicken. So I just like to skim those off the top of the soup as well as it cooks down. So I'll just turn this right down now and let it simmer. I'll put the lid on it a little bit. I won't put it on it over the top completely and close it. I will just leave a little bit there for the air to come out. And I'll turn that pot all the way down and let that simmer down now. So like I said, it'll probably cook for about 3 or 3.5 hours in total, but I'll come back in about an hour, season it, skim the impurities off the top, and we'll have a look at it then. Okay, so this has been cooking for an hour. So I'm just gonna take that lid off. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to skim the top of the soup here and just take off the impurities that have come out of the chicken. So it's just, you'll see it just looks like, so that white stuff there, it's just the impurities coming out of the chicken. So I'm just going to skim the top of the pot here, get as much of that off as possible, and then I'm going to season it. So I'll have a taste of it as it is now. It won't be very salty at all. So I'll just skim some more of the surface and then we'll season it. Okay, so I've skimmed the top of that. Now I'm going to add, to start with, a tablespoon of salt into that. Now remember, there is quite a lot of liquid in here. So a tablespoon, depending on how big your soup pot is and how much liquid you've got in there, it may not make a difference at all. So I've just seasoned that now with that tablespoon of salt. So I'll let that cook in for a couple of minutes, and then we'll have a taste and we'll see if we need some more. So just give it a bit of a stir. Now the skimming, you can keep doing that as it cooks. You can also cook this today and then put it in the fridge and cook it down again tomorrow to eat. There's a really easy way of getting the impurities out if you do that. So once you've cooked this for a couple of hours now, then if you put it in the fridge, the impurities will actually come to the surface as the soup cools, and they almost solidify, and they're actually a lot easier to take out then. So we'll just let this cook down for another minute or two, have a taste of the seasoning and see if we need to add any more salt. Okay, so that tablespoon was almost the perfect amount of seasoning. I have topped it up with water though again. And I will do that quite a few times as the soup cooks. So the longer the soup cooks, the more intense that stock flavor is. So you can keep adding water so that you get a bit more stock out of it, and then you can just adjust your seasoning to taste as it goes. So I'll just let this cook down now for a few more hours. I will check on it every half an hour or so, and we'll come back when we're ready to take the meat off the bones of the chicken and let that cook in for a little bit as well. Okay, so this has been cooking down for about 2.5 hours in total now. So I've kept the lid on there so the water hasn't cooked out of this too much. It has cooked out a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is, you can actually see that the chicken's falling apart almost. So it's been cooking for quite a while. It's coming off the bone. So I'm just going to take those bits of chicken out and get all the meat off them. And I'll also take the skin out, because that's where a lot of the impurity comes from. So I'll shred all that chicken off and put the chicken back in the broth and just let that cook down for another half an hour once I've done that. Okay, so I've taken all the meat off those bits of Maryland. Oh, and I've left a bone in there. So I'm just going to add that chicken meat back into the soup stock. So I'm going to let that cook now for another 15 minutes, half an hour. Now while that's happening, I am going to boil up some water, and I'm actually going to cook down some Risoni. So we have this with our chicken soup. You can also break up angel hair pasta. So it's like what the Italians call it pastina, essentially. So you just have that in with your broth, and it just, you can make your soup a bit more of a meal rather than just a broth. Now, you can also, with this broth, strain everything out and use it essentially as a chicken stock base. But the way my family traditionally have it is like this, with all the veggies in it, and then you add the Risoni or the pastina at the end. So I'll just cook up the Risoni, and we'll let the pieces of chicken cook down in the soup for a little bit, and then once the Risoni's come to the boil and cooked up, I'll serve it up. So the soup's been cooking for all up just over 3 hours now. So what I did was I cooked up the Risoni and it boiled up. So you cook it like you would pasta, and I've just added a bit of the soup broth into that. So to serve up, I'll just put a couple of ladles of the Risoni in the bowl, and then some of the soup. So I do a couple of ladles of the veggies and the chicken meat and stuff. And then I'll just top it up with the broth on top. And then on top to serve, I'll just put some fresh parsley, and I'll grate some cheese as well. I'm a bit of a cheese fiend though, so I probably have more than I should. So just put some fresh cheese on top, but you'll also have that cheese that's cooked through the soup with that rindy bit that's in there. So if you ever buy bits of cheese, keep those rinds, because you can throw them in your soup. So I've got a bag in the fridge usually that I've got a couple of rinds in. I've got a fresh one today from that piece here. So just grate some fresh cheese on top, and that's your homemade Italian style soup. So all the instructions and the recipe will be below this video on our YouTube channel. We've got a whole bunch of other activities on our YouTube channel. Go and have a look. Thanks for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed the soup recipe.